if you are an ASP.NET developer, this looks very similar to saying data source equals blah and bind data. Okay? And I think that's a good thing. So now we're going to go over here to Twitter Search CS and take a look at this guy. Okay. So first off, we see that we're going to inherit from UI table view data source. Inside there, we've got a couple of initializers here. And we've got a method here, search by term. We're going to call out to the Twitter Search API, and then we are going to pull data out of it. So this is fairly common data. You could actually run this on Visual Studio, this part of the code. In fact, I actually wrote this initially in Visual Studio. Then I pull the information back, and using link to XML, I can run my query and get my data back. That's all that's doing. Now, here's where some things that are a little bit different come up. I need to implement this method getCell, and it's going to take in some parameters, the UI table view that we're going to use, the index path, and we're going to use this code right here to create our cells, and then we're actually going to go back up here. See, I'd created a dictionary. Whoops. A dictionary right there. And we're going to add these guys into our dictionary. And this is a feature that Apple's implemented to allow us to have a fairly quick mechanism to access table cell data. And then, so I've created some controllers. I've created my table cell controller. And then I have assigned this date, person, and status properties with these values that you see here. Okay? And then I'm going to return that cell. The next thing I'm going to do, how many rows am I going to put in my selection, or in my section, I'm sorry. And in this case, I'm not going to divide anything up into a section, so I'm just going to put the, how many ever records are returned to me, I'll put that into my rows in section. What this will do, I could separate out into sections if I wanted to, but I've just chosen not to do it. And you'll see that I've got this public class here, which is basically just some data that comes back from my Twitter search. Okay? Now you're probably sitting there thinking, okay, this is great, but I've got to have, where's this table cell controller thing? So we're going to look at this guy here, and he's built in Interface Builder. And Interface Builder's coming up. Unfortunately, it's going to come up rather slowly because I've got a 3-year-old Mac, and it's a little bit slow. So you can see that I've created this table cell here. And with the table cell, one thing I want to show you is, let's see, I got some outlets defined here. Yeah. So I've defined some outlets. In this case, instead of exposing this stuff to the app delegate, I'm going to expose it to my table cell controller. Because my table cell controller is actually who's going to perform the updates. And if we go look in my table cell controller, I've got now 2 associated CS files with my zip. The designer.cs file, you really don't want to go touch, because if you do, you'll most likely break things, and it will probably be overwritten if you don't break something when the interface builder writes the files. Now you can go touch the regular .cs file, and in the .cs file, which is inherited from UI view controller, you can create some public properties, and you can then perform get and sets on them. So when you do that, you've now got the ability to touch all of the items that you've exposed in that cell. And then you create the cells for the UI table view and then just add them into the UI table view. And so that's how to create a custom look with your UI table view. Alright, switch back over. Now, a couple of things that I want to mention. Some things that are a little bit, I don't know if I want to call them inaccurate or not. But when MonoTouch first came out, the 1.0 release, there were issues with debugging. You could say console.writeLine, which would write back, printf, but there were some breakpoint issues. And so with the actual, I think it was the 1.1 release, but it may have been the 1.2 release, they have resolved that. So you can actually go in and you can set breakpoints. It uses the MonoTouch, the soft compiler, soft debugger, and works. And I've actually found it works really well. Here we go. Next slide. You can set breakpoints, as I said. Uses the soft debugger. It'll support the simulator. Actually, it'll also support the actual physical device. So you've got some code that you've written that's running in debug mode on the device. As long as your Mac can get to it, either directly connected or over some Wi-Fi, you should be able to debug. And it actually works. You can set breakpoints. A couple of caveats that I found. The debug code obviously can be rather large, so be patient. You don't want to try and debug main or finished launching because of that 20-second, the startup rules. You're going to consume more memory, and there's going to be a performance hit. And when I talk about there's going to be a performance hit when you're running in debug mode and trying to step through code and do all this, there can be, in certain situations, a rather large performance hit. Literally, I was walking through some code, having to deal with some database stuff on the device, and literally I stepped into one line and I thought that my Mac had just locked. I was like, what in the world's going on? And about 3 or 4 minutes later, it came back. So I think I was opening a data reader or opening a connection or something like that. So just have a little bit of patience. That obviously is the extreme example. As you step through code, you see running, step, step, step most of the time. Now, what is the first application that was shown for the iPhone and for that ability to run native apps? And you may have seen it. It was the Urban Spoon application. And what it used the accelerometer. And I've got a example. I got to thank my buddy Martin Bowling for giving me the initial idea for it. And then I took his code and expanded on it. Now, I have done, when we get done with this, I'll mention there's some things I've done that you probably don't want to do.